Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Authentic Avenue. My name's Adam Connor. Today we deep dive into the world of retail with somebody who spends his entire life touring stores. His name is Dan Hodges. He's the founder of Retail Store Tours, appropriately named. And today I do two things. One, I learn a little bit more about how retail has evolved in 2019, 2021, and going forward to 22. But I also get a little deeper into his founder story, which is something that, if you've listened to a little bit of my content before, you know I want to get more into. So I ask him some of those stories about the come up, and then we get into what he knows best, what retail is doing to attract more consumers, and some of the things that you don't see when you walk into a retail store, even though they are clearly there. He gives us some tips as to what to look for when we're there, because that world is changing faster than we all could possibly imagine. So sit back and enjoy this conversation. This is Dan Hodges. Dan, how are you? It's good to talk. Been a while,
It's been
actually.
a while, Adam. It's great to talk to you, and it's a wonderful time here in New York in the fall of 2021.
We met last, actually more near my neck of the woods in Alexandria, Virginia. We did not do it on video. Viewers, this is the first time you'll see this on video. And if you are a Adam Connor extraordinaire, you'll have seen or heard our conversation on a past podcast where we talked a little bit about the retail landscape as it was understood, I believe, in that time in the fall of 2019, I'm pretty sure, is when that was. But a lot has changed, both about the world and the industry. And I do want to ask you a little bit about that, Dan. But more to what's immediately interesting to me first, this is something that you have founded and built from the ground up. So let me start with that story and that perspective. Why'd you do it?
I did it because the feedback I've been getting has been really consistent and very, very positive. So the idea of the retail store tours actually came from I was conducting a session with the retailers at the NRF, and we had just successfully completed what's called Expo Tours, which is a tour of the big technologies on the showroom floor. And I asked for feedback, and the feedback I got was, "Dan, this was great. Don't change a thing," which is shockingly good feedback.
Yep.
But there was a retailer from Australia. He was from Woolworths in Australia, and he said, "Dan, I think what you need to do is get us out to see the stores. That's what we really need. We're okay with the show floor, but get us out to see the stores."
Yeah. Right.
So I said, "Okay, well, what does that mean?" And anyway, but that it actually came from him. And I said, "You know what? That's actually a really good suggestion." So it really came from that retailer who was a vice president. He's still in the business at Woolworths in Australia.
Right. So you started this idea because, and NRF, by the way, it stands for National Retail Federation. I have that right, Dan.
That's it. Yeah.
They got a big show every January, so it's actually coming up.
Yep.
I've been to that show like 3 times. Um, let me back it up. That place is a madhouse for like 4 days. It's nothing but booths and keynotes and presentations. It can be very overwhelming. It's a highly sensory experience. It's like Las Vegas. The lights never turn off and you never know what time it is. So I get it. If somebody's there for a couple days and you lead them through a great tour curated of the floor, that can be very helpful.
Yeah.
But you're in the middle of New York. It's where all the biggest retailers have all their flagship spaces. So I also get what the Woolworths guy is saying is like, lead us to the stores. Now, when he asked you that, first of all, I imagine you were flattered by that positive feedback of like, don't change a thing with what you're doing today. But I mean, in your head, wasn't there a moment or two of like, I can't just traipse people through random retail stores? Like, how did that actually come together? Because what they were essentially asking for was for like you to just walk them through a store, nothing would be bought. It would be, I don't know, to me, that seems like an odd experience without having curated a company like you. So, what'd you do then? Like, how did you plan out? Okay, I'm going to answer this Woolworths guy's request. Like, how did you even start thinking about that?
Great. So sometimes, knowing what you don't know is a blessing. And so I knew in this case that I really was not an expert in this area at all. So what I did was I found a colleague of mine who is an expert, and we basically spent 2 to 3 months walking the neighborhoods of New York. Hudson Yards was not even a American Dream, or even factors, but Soho, NoHo, the Oculus, Westfield World Trade Center, and Brookfield Place. And after about a month, it became clear that there are actually very explicit narratives that you can derive from these stories and lessons. And so what we did for the first round was we created 6 stops at different locations and different venues. And for the most part, we got it about 85 to 90% right because we asked for the retailers what they were looking for. We found the stores, we found the people that were interesting, and then since then, it's just been evolving. I mean, everything we've done has been based on feedback from the market. So these aren't really my ideas. They're just me listening and then trying to create the best experience possible. So
And then executing.
the strength, Adam, was I knew what I didn't know, and I knew nothing about this. So I decided to just spend 3 or 4 months walking the streets of New York in different retails and figuring out, well, what is it?
Yeah. Let me ask a question about like where the rubber would actually hit the road there. So at the end of the day, and by the way, in that previous sentence, you were talking about retailers were asking you, these are the tour guests, I would guess,
Yeah,
asking about other retailers being the hosts that you would walk through.
yeah.
Um, did it ever cross your mind that people might find it strange that you just be like walking through the retailer and talking about them without them knowing? I mean, like, what sort of prep went into those 3 or 4 months? You'd have to go around and like ask, "Hey, can I walk through your store once a week with some people?"
Well,
That are potentially competitors of yours. Like, how did that work?
Well, that's a great question. And so about a month in, I started approaching retailers, and I had the exact same. It was a bit of a panic where I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to these retailers and I'm asking them to bring in other retailers, and isn't that a problem? So
Yeah.
we quickly went to about 3 stores, and they said, "Are you kidding me? You bring them in the store, we'll sell them." And so it was just the opposite of what I thought, almost the
Okay.
complete opposite. And then when I spoke to Satish, who was the COO of Sephora, now he's the CEO of a Container Store. I said, Satish, can we? Would it be okay if we went into the Sephora stores and your people gave demos of the products? And he said, bring them in, Dan. Bring them in. In fact, Sephora is, I call it, the most dangerous store tour, and the reason is when I have female executives, I literally will lose the entire group in Sephora. So I've had to actually make that the last stop whenever I do these, including beauty category. So yeah, it, I had really no idea. And then when I actually asked that question at him, because I had a lot of trepidation on that, I thought, oh my God, now what about no one wants us? It was just the opposite.
That's what would go through my head at least. I
Yeah,
mean, if I'm thinking, and maybe I put it into the perspective of a different industry because I'm thinking, all right, if the retail location is meant to be where everything is presented and done, I immediately in my head was like, well, you wouldn't walk a Coke person through a Pepsi factory, but that's not the right thing. The real thing is like you wouldn't walk a Coke person down the shelf at the grocery store where the Pepsi bottles are, but you certainly would because that's free and public domain information essentially at that point. Good note on the Sephora, by the way. I did a little bit of business with Sephora for my first job, and yeah, I mean, I'm not their key demo, but it is a compelling experience to walk through there. You could just ask anybody who listeners, viewers who's a fan of the brand.
and Sephora is a best practice. I mean, they do everything right. They hire people that are kind, evaluate them on empathy, they train them, they use technology, they have a unique value proposition. It's truly a model for really retail excellence throughout the world. And you don't have to be in the beauty business, you just have to be in the people business. And essentially, everybody in retail is in the people business. So learning their lessons is pretty key. And the last point is that from an ROI point of view, about 30 to 40% of the people that we take on these experiences go back and buy in the store. In fact, on our first tour, we had someone buy $14,000 worth of jewelry in Soho. So, it's an
Just right there, that seems
yeah,
like a pretty considered purchase to
ROI.
make immediately.
Yeah, but
Money's a crazy thing.
these people have huge networks, and they're
Yeah,
generally, about half of them from around the world. So what happens is one Brazilian goes back and tells 300, and then over 2 or 3 years, you have 300 people showing up at that store based on that one visit that we made. So, some of this stuff isn't intuitive, but it's certainly impactful.
sure. How many of those tours that you were leading through the streets of New York did it take before you thought, as a founder, not only am I on to something, but I'm doing it uniquely better than anyone else. I got to run with this 100% full time. I can't look back. I mean, was that like that from the start, or was this something that you had just heard at a conference and done a test of, and it was on the side. What made that? What was that aha moment that was like, oh no, no, this is a life career thing?
Two things. One was we realized after the second day of our first tours in 2017 that even though people are from the same company, like Coca-Cola or Walmart or Carrefour, they want different things. So the CTO wants to know what's the technology. The CMO wants to know why are they coming in the store. The board members and the CEO wants to know what's the business model. So what we've done is we've incorporated that feedback so that on the general tours that like anyone can just go on a general tour, and we're mindful of the technology in Sephora or Apple or Beta. And so we pretty much cover that. And the really the energy thing that makes me so excited about this, uh, and so excited to talk to you about this, is that when we first talk to people, we say, "Well, would you like to take a store tour?" And they say, "Store tour? Why do I need a store tour?" I say, "Well, you don't, but 95% of what you're looking at, you're not seeing." And they look at me and say, "Well," thinking, what kind of a sales pitch is that?
Yeah, you think I'm stupid?
Is this guy arrogant or what?
Yeah.
And we're certainly not arrogant. And so after about 2 hours, I say, "Oh my God, 95% of what I was looking at, I wasn't seeing, and I'll never look at it again."
And you
So
take a bow and you say, "You're welcome." No.
I would say, "Sign up for another one," and they
Yeah,
do.
right. Yeah, yeah. Come on back with other boards that you know. Yeah,
I know. But the from what keeps me motivated is that I see the lights go on in their imaginations and their business. They're looking at things they've been looking at for years, and they're not seeing it the same way anymore. So to me, that is, and I've worked with the top brands in the world, around the world, and
yeah.
whether it's people that are new in the career or people who've been doing this and leading multi-billion-dollar companies for 20 years, it's the same thing. The lights go off, and they stay on. They stay on. They don't go off after this. So it really is. It's a huge amount of work to get those types of experiences and those tours and those responses, but it's worth it. And all of our business, we've had about 10,000 people take these. It's all word of mouth. We do very little advertising. So that's a good, maybe a good indicator.
So you have been running the New York game
Yeah.
several years. You have all these tour guests come through. They love it. They're seeing the 95%. They're spreading the word via word of mouth, maybe. So that's great for you. Keep the advertising costs low. But by the time that we first chatted, again, listeners, viewers, if you're paying attention at home, that's August of 2019, around there, I think, sometime in the fall, you had started to explore areas outside of New York, specifically China. Now, I say it's an opportune time to have done so just because of what ended up happening around the world within 6 to 8 months after. But can you explain to me why you went to China in the first place? And then we'll explore what you saw and how that's proliferated beyond China's four walls.
So what I was getting in general signals was China is amazing. You have to go to China. You have to see this innovation. But who knows what that meant? So fortunately, I was able to meet the CCFA, which is the largest retail association in the world, and they are the retail, the restaurant, the convenience store association. And I spoke to Kevin Pang, who is the CEO or managing director or secretary general. He said, "Come over, Dan, and I'll set up a some of the top retailers in China, Alibaba." And then I also had met Sharon Shi, who runs China for us at the design show in New York. And she said, "Dan, come over and I'll show you what's going on in China." So I spent around over a week there visiting Guangzhou, Shanghai, and Beijing, and they were right. The Chinese are doing things differently, and it was extraordinarily worth the visit and the insights. And what's interesting is, as I was in China, we got a request from one of the largest consumer packaged goods companies in the world to do a VIP tour for them in the beauty category in Shanghai. So we got instant validation that this was a good idea, and we got our first deal, which has been a repeat deal ever since. So it's interesting because the Chinese have a different approach. We visited the T11 supermarket, and that particular supermarket was built by software engineers who built the supermarket to write the code to run a supermarket. So, perspective was just amazing. And what was interesting was that when the pandemic broke in the first quarter of 2020, I called upon the Chinese retail leaders to provide guidance to the U.S. as to how they were dealing with the pandemic, which in March of 2020 through July of 2020 was not a lot of fun for retailers. So it was interesting because that particular connection led to creating the World Retail Forum, which is really a vehicle that we created as a short-term gap to help people learn together to recover stronger. And that resulted in thousands of executives from around the world joining us every week. And sometimes we were doing 2 or 3 broadcasts a week during the early days because it was so mind-boggling as to what was going on, and there was really no information available at that time. So it's interesting, Adam, how one trip to China and a pandemic really sort of catapulted us in a big way in front of the global consciousness of retail decision makers. So you never know, right?
You never know. But you did know what your business model was for years and years prior to that pandemic. And as you said, March to July of 2020, of course, that was the pinnacle of the not fun time to be a retailer, but
Yes.
also probably the pinnacle of the not fun time as a business proprietor whose main product was walking through an in person experience in a retail store. So I got to ask, through 2020, what were some of the things that you did to, I don't want to say stay afloat because I imagine you have a thriving business, but like your main thing was disrupted. How'd you handle that?
We leaned right into it because we decided that there was a need for global information, and there was. And so we created sponsorship opportunities for the World Retail Forum, but not at first. We were just doing it as a goodwill market adjustment. And then what's interesting is that the pandemic created a problem, but also an opportunity, in that we have about 30 to 40,000 videos and photos of stores from around the world. So we created the concept of virtual store tours. And from March until even the current day, we'll do virtual store tours. And here's the plus and the minus. The minus is that we're not really experiencing Soho, and with the 5 senses, there's nothing like a store tour. However, we can cover a category like fashion or beauty or sustainability on a global basis through a virtual tour. So we can literally go 30,000 miles of traveling in 2 hours and basically see the best of any category around the world in almost real time. So there are pluses and minuses to that, but I think we created the virtual store tour. I think we did, and it's been hugely impactful. In fact, we did something in the grocery sector with the top 5 CEOs in the United States. And after the experience, they said, "You know what? I was thinking about going to China, but I don't have to anymore." So that kind of feedback is great.
Yeah, I would say if you can get in front of that, capture some of that market, what's
Yeah,
not to love?
exactly.
Let's talk about love for the retail sector here for a moment because I'll fast forward through all of that through the not fun into what is now, I'm guessing, probably for you, incredibly fun because you built all that brand equity and now you're in a world where everybody's back in the store and you are just a month or so out from the big show that started it all, NRF, in the first week or second week of January. I'm forgetting when. It's always early January.
It's the 16th through the 16th, 17th, 18th in New York City.
There you go. All right, listeners, viewers, if you were planning on going and your boss is getting on you to expense those tickets, you better get on it because it's closing soon.
And at the NRF, we're doing American Dream, which we could talk about, Hudson Yards and Soho. So those retailers that go to the NRF Big Show or visit us anytime during the year will have an experience that will be a life experience at those 3 locations.
So now we're looking forward to 22 and retail's ever changing, of course, but we're going to have a year where The foot traffic and the innovation within the industry, my guess, is going to accelerate even harder than it did in 20 and 21, maybe combined. You're at the cutting edge of that. What do you see? What are you excited about? And what's the story that Retail Store Tours is going to be telling come next year?
Yeah, well, two things to answer the question. The first is, in speaking with some of a large packaged goods company, they said to me in March of this year, they said, Dan, what are you doing in Brooklyn? I said, nothing. I said, well, what should I do? Why would I go to Brooklyn? They said, well, that's where we get all of our ideas for innovation, new business models, and technologies. And so I spent several months in Brooklyn, in Atlantic Avenue, Williamsburg, Industry City, and Dumbo, and they're absolutely right. So what we did was we launched basically 4 tours for Brooklyn because it's so unique and it's so special. So those are the areas that we focused on. Some of the areas, I mean, because we're real time, because we're on the ground, probably one of the areas I think is the most exciting. And I haven't really seen it talked about much, maybe because it's still evolving in the early days. But I'm seeing the grocery industry really rapidly evolving, or rapidly thinking about evolving, let's say. And so we're seeing companies like Walmart and Kroger get into the medical business. For example, Walmart has opened up clinics, and you can go to your Walmart and get a medical operation, or medical diagnostics rather, treatment. They have an optical department it's sometimes freestanding or next to it. Kroger's doing that. We're seeing some of the supermarkets on the West Coast create a whole mind and body experience where you can actually go to the store and get nutrition and fitness sort of life coaching. And that's happening on some of the supermarket chains in the West Coast in California. So it's evolving, and the pace of change is just accelerated. And I think it's for the most part, it's like maybe the early days of the internet in '95 and '96. We all kind of knew it was important. We didn't quite know what that meant. In this case, with the health, the need for nutrition, the sort of evolving values, the grocery store, those who are embracing it are really making that a central hub of people's lives and fundamentally changing grocery. And again, you'll see this over the next 5 to 10 years, but we're just seeing that happening right now in New York and in different places around the world. So that's exciting. And there's all the talk about technology, and there always will be from now until long past when we're gone. But the most important factor in retail is the human touch, and technology can improve the human touch as it does with Apple or with Sephora. But if you're skewing to one direction, just be mindful that for 200,000 years we've been very successful with each other, interacting with each other, building networks, and so forth. So it's always hard to be when you're in this technology sort of area that we're in right now. You kind of think that the technology is everything, and it is really important. But the human touch is the bottom line for retail sales. And those companies that invest in their people, again, like Apple, Williams-Sonoma, Nordstrom, Sephora, they're seeing bottom line results that the industry is really envious of. So it's really important to get caught up in reality versus getting caught up in sort of the moment.
Let me ask you a question before we get to the ultimate one of the day, just which is mostly based on the word that I like to talk about here, which is authenticity. And that is, first, for the people who are still 95% blind, based on what we were talking about earlier,
Yeah,
what's a common thing or two that somebody walking through a store sees but doesn't see?
sure. A good example is Beta. And Vibhu Norby is the founder. He was chief engineer for Nest. And so when you go into Beta, or this could be Tiffany or Nordstrom, these people that you're dealing with, they were hired because of their kindness and evaluated based on their empathy. And the people in Beta know over 700 products in terms of what they do and what their functionality is. What you don't see in Beta is the fact that maybe I have the Dan Hodges sports massage gun. I've invested my time and energy, and I pay Beta rent to have the Dan Hodges massage gun in Beta. So as you look as a consumer, you look at, oh, there's that massage gun. But what you don't know is that there are sensors above that are saying, oh, well, there's a male or female that spent X or Y minutes near the gun. There was a male or female that picked up the gun and put it down and used it and collected data. So there's a lot of data that's going on, and it can make you a better entrepreneur or a better person with product. And then based on that data that I collected beta, and there are many models, Allure is a model like this, and their neighborhood goods. So this is not unique just to beta. There are other models that are developing like this where you pay rent, you collect data, and they drive traffic to the store. The store becomes almost like not a play, but a center of experience. And so these are things that, if you're walking by the store, you'll say, okay, looks like they're selling some electronic stuff in there. What's next? And it's like, no, no, no. Look at that person. Look at what's behind the person. Look at all that technology in the ceiling that you probably don't even aware of. Look at all the data that's being generated and all the insights. And I have to tell you that when you have a best practice where you use technology and the human touch, our biggest challenge with places like Apple or Sephora or Beta is that we can't get them out of the store because it becomes so engaging that nobody wants to leave. So the bottom line is when you'll look at lighting and we'll say, well, what about this lighting in the store? So, well, the lighting is good. Well, did you know that lighting, the properties of lighting, keeps people in the store 17% longer? Did you ever feel when you're in a shopping center or a store, the air circulation? Because the use of having robust air circulation keeps people awake and alert. Have you ever noticed that when you're walking in a shopping center or at a store, that there are chairs? What happens to people? They get tired. What happens when you have a chair? They become less tired. When they become less tired, they spend more time in the store. Have you thought about the fact that there is, coffee and food in stores? What happens to people? They get hungry. So there's a million things that are going on that, like in Soho, for example, we talk about clusters. There's a Korean streetwear cluster. And so what happens is once one cluster gets available, it creates a satellite for other brands. And if you're walking through Soho, you'll say, okay, well, that's that store over there, and that's that store over there. No, there's Baiting Ape, which is a Korean streetwear company, next to another Korean streetwear company, next to another Korean. So what happens is nothing is random. And so once you distinguish the patterns, you start seeing. A good example on Green Street is the Louis Vuitton store. They do a pop-up store next to their main store every quarter. And that is like millions and millions of people throughout the world await when that pop-up store is unveiled. The last pop-up store they had was they created a pool in the store, so you felt like you were at the bottom of a pool. So there's so many tricks and so many techniques that are being used so that as a person with five senses, when you go there, all of your senses are activated. The last example is the Atelier Beauty Chanel in Soho. When you go into that store, you say, "Oh my God, this is really it's really not for me because I'm a male and I don't put makeup on, at least not yet." But but then when you look at the brilliance of the store, they've actually created a place where you can pick lipstick out or apply foundation or mascara or any of the beauty attributes, and you can do it self-serve or you can do it with expert help. So the level of intelligence and research that goes into creating these experiences in the stores is stunning. And whether you're a big company or a small company, whether you're in the beauty business or not, you look at the thought process, and the thought process drives these experiences, which are memorable, which are viral rather, and unforgettable. Long-winded answer.
Well, it was a complete one too. So, okay, a couple things. Listeners, viewers, if you're in New York, you can go to any of those places that Dan just mentioned. If you are not, you can try and pick out wherever you are how other things are going on in the store that you may not see, even if it is technology coming out of the ceiling. And for me personally, I'm curious as to like where my data profile lives elsewhere. What do I look like as a shopper? How much time do I spend looking at whatever toy there is on the shelf. Yeah, I shop for toys, I guess, in this scenario. But anyway, I am fascinated by that world, and it's cool that you began this just from somebody at a conference saying, "Hey, lead me through a store." What an interesting niche that has developed, and now to again be at the cutting edge of it. It's just a cool story for me to hear from you. So, Dan, I really, really appreciate the time here. I'm looking forward to everything retail has to offer in 22. Looking forward to your insights there as well, and best of luck for the business.
Hey, take a tour. It's the most fun you'll ever have in 2 hours.
There you go. Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, Adam.
Well, I tell you what, I'm gonna pay a lot more attention next time I go into a retail location, any just to see like what's being collected on me. I'll look around. Maybe I'll look into the ceiling for some cameras or some technology. How do they know that I've been looking at those Reese's puffs or whatever it is? But I was really glad to talk to Dan, who has got this down to a science and has worked in a niche and carved out a really wonderful opportunity for himself. And as a founder, just learning how he did it and how he slogged through 2020 to come out stronger on the other side was also super interesting to me. Hopefully, you agree. And if you do, you should stay tuned because I'm going to have more conversations just like this. You can follow here if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast, if you're reading along with this somewhere. I encourage you to continue to do that and let me know what you think of these. Until next time, though, I'll sign off as I always do. Until the next time that I get real again with you, thanks for taking a walk with me down Authentic Avenue, and we will see you later.